Hello and welcome to my video all about how to do the icord bind off. Normally when you bind off, you simply keep decreasing the number of stitches on your needles by 1 until there's only 1 stitch remaining. In the icord bind off, you have to add 3 stitches to begin with, and that's what the icord is going to be built from. So you have to add stitches to start with. Now the icord bind off is a very stable and sturdy kind of edging, and is particularly good if you've been doing an icord edging on the rest of your knitting as well. However, you should note that the icord bind off is not very stretchy at all, so if you've made a ribbed border or something you're intending to be stretchy, then the icord bind off wouldn't be the right choice. Okay, so to start with, we need to cast on an extra 3 stitches. To do this, I'm going to use the knitted cast on technique. So all you do is go into the top stitch and do all the normal stages of a normal knit stitch until you get to the point where you would normally push that stitch off the top of the left needle. Instead of pushing the stitch off the needle, you take your right hand needle and pull it slightly towards you, and that enlarges the loop that you have around the needle. You then simply hook that loop over the top of the left hand needle, like so. And that has created 1 extra stitch. You now need to do that 2 more times. So again, you go into the next stitch as if to knit, do the normal stages of a knit stitch until you get to the point where you would otherwise push that knit stitch off the needle, and instead you pull the right hand needle towards you slightly to make that loop bigger, and then you hook the loop over the left hand needle. And then you do that 1 more time so that you now have 3 extra stitches on your left hand needle. These stitches form the basis of the icord. The next step is to do 2 normal knit stitches. You then slip a stitch knitwise. So with the yarn still at the back, you take your right hand needle up through that top stitch as if to knit, and then just slip that stitch right off the left hand needle. And you then do 1 more knit stitch. You'll then be able to see that there are 4 stitches on the right hand needle, 3 of which are knit stitches, and 1 that looks different because it's the slip stitch. What you need to do is use your left hand needle to pick up that slip stitch, take it over the knit stitch above it and off the end of the needle. So making sure that that top knit stitch stays on the needle, you take the slip stitch over the top of it and drop it off the needle. In a knitting pattern, this would be abbreviated to PSSO, meaning pass the slip stitch over. We now have 3 stitches on the right hand needle, and those now need to be transferred back to the left hand needle. To do this, you take your left hand needle and slip it into the front of each of the stitches on the right hand needle, and simply slip them onto the left hand needle, and you do that for all the stitches. An icord is a tube shape, and in order to pull the stitches into the tube shape, they need to be quite tight. So just make sure that whilst you're working on this icord bind off, you keep the yarn quite tight and don't let it become loose, because then it'll be a bit messy. And that's all of the stages of the icord bind off. You simply repeat what we've already done, starting with the knit stitches. So we do 2 knit stitches again. Then we slip a stitch knitwise and knit another stitch. We then pick up the slip stitch and take it over the top knit stitch and off the end of the needle, thus reducing the overall number of stitches on the needles by 1. We then slip all of those stitches back to the left hand needle and start the whole thing again. So 2 knit stitches, slip a stitch knitwise, another knit stitch, and then pass the slip stitch over, before slipping the stitches back to the left hand needle. And we keep repeating this over and over again until there are only 3 stitches remaining. Once you only have 3 stitches left, and you've returned those to the left hand needle, you then do 2 knit stitches. You then use your left hand needle to lift the lower knit stitch over the upper knit stitch and off the end of the needle. You then knit the final stitch to give you 2 knit stitches on the right hand needle, and then you lift the lower knit stitch again over the upper knit stitch and off the end of the needle, therefore leaving you with just the 1 stitch remaining. And then, like any other bind off, you cut the working yarn to leave you with at least 8 inches of tail. Feed that tail through the remaining loop and tighten. You would then weave the yarn tail into the back of your knitted work to finish. And there you go, there's the icord bind off. Obviously, the finer the weight of yarn you're using, the smaller and finer the icord finish will be. I'm using super bulky yarn, so obviously it looks quite chunky in this example. I hope this video has been helpful to you, and thank you very much for watching.